So we're going to talk about how to train with pain and still make progress in the gym. This is something a lot of people struggle with because the traditional advice is, hey, you know what? If it hurts, don't do it. Hey, why don't you take time off? Hey, it's, lifting's not that big of a deal. You should probably just stop. So I think that's horseshit, to be honest. So what we're going to do is talk about how we can actually train with pain, still make progress, and eliminate that pain. Now, to be clear, this is one part of the equation, right? So one thing that I see a lot of people miss, or a misconception, is, hey, I'm going to do these 3 exercises that I saw on this page, that page, whatever, and it's going to be the cure for everything. That is not correct. Okay, if it was that simple, you would already be out of pain because you've probably saved 800 different reels like that, right? So what you actually need is more of a system, okay? So to be clear, what we're going over is not the entire thing, okay? I can't do a 5-hour video and still, keep people's attention. I'm just not that entertaining, but I digress. So what we want to do is, first and foremost, you should have a plan in place on how to get out of pain, right? Whether that's a rehab, whether that's movement modification, whatever it is, I don't care. I do care, but I don't care. You need to be making steps to getting out of pain, okay? That is step number 1. Now, in order to train with pain, how to keep progressing, all of that, I have had hundreds of lifters come to me, whether they are afraid of losing their gains, they've been told not to do something, so they got weaker. I've had people literally in meet prep, right? In some kind of comp prep where, hey, we just can't take time off. That's not possible. So what can we do instead? This is exactly what we do, okay? There's 2 things that we need to just kind of distinguish right out the gate. Really, it comes down to one thing, but that is intensity, right? How hard are you working? Now, we can look at this 2 different ways. We can look at absolute, which is the number on the bar, the number on the machine, whatever. So that is the absolute weight. Here's a percentage of my 1 rep max. Here's 200 pounds. Here's 300 pounds. I don't care. But we have this absolute number. Then we can look and we can be more relative, or how it feels, okay? So for you, maybe more serious lifters, this by RPE. So what we essentially want to do is look at, hey, how can we make this movement harder while keeping the weight a little bit lighter while respecting the pain, okay? So that is one of the biggest things that we have to get clear on right out of the gate. With that being said, this is the principle that is going to help us train with pain while respecting the pain, right? Making progress while we're not pissing things off. So here's a few things that my clients do in order to do just that. So we have to find the entry point. So let's use shoulder pain with bench as an example, okay? I have someone come to me, they have pain with a 200-pound bench, but 150 feels okay. So we know, hey, we don't have to switch, we don't have to do it while it's not, they're 200 pounds, we can still make progress with that 150, okay? So what we would do in that context is, hey, let's add a tempo, let's add a pause, let's add some pre-fatigue, okay? So can we pre-fatigue the chest a little bit so that that bench does actually feel harder while, we're respecting the pain? So what I mean by that, if we do an isolated spin press, if we do a chest fly, if we do whatever, we're pre-fatiguing these muscles, and then we go to do a bench. Well, 150 pounds versus a 200 is automatically going to feel heavier because things are already a little taxed, right? So we're still getting a good stimulus with the workout. We're just not going to your absolute max or, some absolute number. And so that is one thing we can do. Now, flip that. If someone has pain and say they can't do a bench press at all because the bottom of their bench hurts, then what we would want to do instead is maybe look at a floor press. Okay, so a floor press, you're literally laying on the floor, right? Doing a bench. You're essentially limiting the range of motion that does hurt. While this is not a full-on permanent fix, this is something that can still allow us to train, to make progress, to get stronger, to get bigger, while respecting the area that hurts. And so what that looks like is, hey, let's do a floor press. You can scale, you can do all that however you need, right? Say you can do 200 pounds, no pain, right? So then what we can do is we can work into that lower range of motion, right? The motion that hurts by doing rehab stuff, by doing lighter weight there. That way we're still making progress, we're still doing all the things, and then we can put those together in a few weeks once the pain has cleared up and gone away. We've already talked about variations, right? So we can do a floor press, we can do a pin bench press, we can do incline, we can do decline, we can do dumbbells, we can do a barbell. All of that just kind of depends on what's going on with you, how we can make that work, okay? But the important thing is we still want to be lifting. We still want to make progress in the gym because you work too damn hard to let your gains suffer, right? So again, I just want to reiterate, to be very clear, this is not a fix, right? You can still train, you can respect the pain, but unless you're doing something to fix the root of the issue, the pain is likely going to keep coming back, right? And so you have to have that system that is looking at both things. How can we get out of pain, and how can we keep progressing in the gym? The next thing that we can look at, so we already talked about finding the entry point, right? Where's your pain at versus where do you not have pain, okay? Whether that's a floor press versus a bench press, whether that's barbell versus dumbbell, right? We can look at those different variations. We can also look at doing a tempo or a pause or that pre-fatigue like I was talking about. So again, the whole idea, the whole premise here is to make progress while respecting the pain. So what we want to do is, instead of just, hey, I normally get a pretty good workout with 200 pounds on the bar, okay? Well, now you have pain, so let's drop to 150, like we talked about earlier. Let's add a tempo. I don't know about you, but if you did a tempo bench press for like a 3-second negative, you're going to feel it, and it's going to suck. And so this is one way that we can keep respecting the pain while also training, okay? I've had clients, I have a client right now, actually. She just signed up with me last week. She tore her labrum in her shoulder, okay? So range of motion's pretty limited. She's a competitive powerlifter, and so she has trouble getting under a squat bar because that range of motion is limited. So while that's not a shoulder-specific movement, the shoulder is very much involved. Well, we can't just not squat, right? She has a competition coming up in February. And so what her coach is doing, what her and I talked about doing is, hey, you know what? Let's try to use a different bar. Let's use a different variation. It's not going to be 100% perfect, right? You can't do a safety squat bar. You can't do a cambered bar and expect it to be the exact same as a back squat, right? A barbell back squat. However, doing a variation that doesn't set you back progress-wise with the shoulder, while also allowing you to train to get stronger to build up your squat, that is very important. And so that's one way that we're looking at that. Another thing, she does have pain with bench, and so we are doing floor press because that bottom range of motion is just super tight, super painful. So we're doing a floor press while we're working on improving the range of motion, improving the tolerance in that position, okay? So again, I've said it a bunch during this, but just ignoring the pain or just training around it is not fixing it, okay? You have to fix it, but these are tips that you can use to make sure you're still making progress in the gym. Okay. I have another client, Kelly. Kelly came to me with shoulder impingement. Okay. He'd been dealing with it for over 12 years, and he was like, I don't know. We ended up doing the rehab stuff, right? But his shoulder, the muscles, the tendons, they weren't really ready for the weight because he had been 12 years of pain, not able to push the way he wants. So what we did instead, we ended up eliminating the pain within a few days, which was absolutely absurd, right? But then what we started to do was we built strength. We did the pauses, we did the tempo, we did all of that stuff, and we progressed him in a strength way that was smart, that respected the pain, the weakness, right? He wasn't as strong in those positions. He wasn't as strong in those exercises because of the years that he had been kind of half-assing his workouts. Kelly, if you're watching this, I did not mean that you were actually half-assing. No need to let your ego show there. I work with some freaking animals, so they are very driven people and very type A and very like perfectionistic. So anyway, I digress. But anyway, with Kelly, what we've done is we've done, tempo bench. We've done some variations. He was having pain coming up, like whenever you sit on a bench for dumbbell bench, getting the dumbbells up to his shoulder was causing pain. So we just found some shoulder hooks that he can put the dumbbells in. So there are ways to work around this, but my ultimate goal for Kelly is, hey, like, you can do everything without limits. You don't have to, like, use these little Band-Aid things, right? And so this is going to allow us to make progress while we're working on the actual issue.